Hello, I'm Charles Mann, editor and host of the Power Sharing series, audio tapes and videotapes about computing. Welcome to another in our programs, Evenings with the Boston Computer Society. These programs feature the people, the products, and the ideas that shape the future of computing. We take you now to the Boston Computer Society meeting as the evening's program gets underway.
Program for personal computers, and about a year later the expression desktop publishing was coined. Even with many other programs coming on the scene at that point, people for the most part thought that desktop publishing was a very narrow niche market that really was not going to have much long-term significance for the personal computer industry or for users in general. But we're very surprised to discover another couple years later that it had become a multi-billion-dollar industry and it had literally revolutionized the way many people work and the way publications are produced, and really the whole nature of the printing business today. Looking back on that and thinking about some of the elements, it was really much more than just a single program that created this whole new industry, but it was a series of enabling technologies coming together with high-resolution graphics and laser printing, and a very key element, a standard that an industry rallied around called PostScript to describe what pages look like for various printing devices so that personal computers could work as easily with laser printers as typesetters. Well, now 6 years later, in 1990, it appears that there's the beginning of something very similar happening. A whole series of enabling technologies are coming together to make possible a new kind of application for personal computers, which hasn't even been coined yet, really, like desktop publishing, but some people call it desktop visualization or electronic rendering. And it's basically the idea of taking something, a lifelike thing that doesn't exist, and making it exist on a personal computer with ultra-realistic three-dimensional graphics and animation. And we have tonight one of the legends in the field of this new science of desktop visualization, ARSmith, who has developed a product called RenderMan, which many are beginning to believe will be to desktop visualization what PostScript was to desktop publishing. And well, if you're not following all of this, he'll explain it a lot better. It's a very, very significant new product that is starting to get a great deal of attention throughout the industry, that is coming down like so many other technologies from the large computer world, and is recently expanded from being available not just to IBM users but also to Macintosh users. It is a great pleasure to welcome to the BCS the founder and executive vice president of Pixar, ARSmith.
Hi. Well, that was exactly what I wanted to say. I'm going to talk about making pictures with computers tonight, and I've brought a lot of pictures with me, including I brought a lot of stills. I'll use it first to make some points, and then I brought along a whole bunch of animations. I usually only show about 4 animations to kind of close up my talk, but I thought maybe this crowd would like them all, so I brought about 10 with me. So if you're real nice, I'll show them to you later. But you got to listen to all the rest of this first. Could we go ahead and drop the house lights and start showing pictures? Let me just start by, well, I suppose maybe you don't know our history at Pixar, but it's basically a group of guys that have been together for a long time that make pictures on computers. A bunch of us have been together for something like 15 years now. And we've just been, pushing pixels out of computers ever since it was possible to do that, basically. So let me step through some of the history very quickly, some of the famous pictures that we've made. I think you'll recognize some of them. And the reason for this is because I want to show you what informs this thing called RenderMan that tonight's topic subject is. This is a composite of elements from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the so-called Genesis demo, which is the first time I got to have some of my stuff on the big screen. This is from Return of the Jedi. Oh, there's one other thing I want to do on the way here. The computer used here was a VAX 11750, as I recall. Okay. About a half a mint machine. This was Return of the Jedi, and this is just a line drawing, believe it or not. This is called Road to Point Reyes. Now, this is just a still. Those other two were pieces from movies, but this is just a still. And we were using a VAX 11780 by now, about a 1 mint machine. Okay. This is, if you'll notice, there's some plants beside the road. Here's just a close-up. By the way, those aren't really plants. Those are Lindenmayer systems, which are kind of it's a generalization of cellular automata to branching structures. In other words, it's just a set of 8 rules operating on binary strings. It's just a mathematical thing. You make it look like a plant with your head. 1984 was generated on a VAX 780. Andre and Wally B. Now, here's the only piece that we've done where we use the real horsepower. The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. We used 15 VAXs and 6 Cray CPUs. Could have done it all on VAXs, but kind of got a little speed up by using the Cray. Just to be fair, though, we only used the integer part, the scalar part of a Cray, so about a 50 MIPS machine. And we got to use it because Cray was trying to sell Lucasfilm a computer, and they let us try it out for a week for free. This was the first time, this is when we tried to show off for the first time articulated motion blur, which is a solution of the hidden surface problem in 4 dimensions. Okay. And these are 4 successive frames to show you what motion blur really looks like when you stop and look. Young Sherlock Holmes is a Steven Spielberg production. This is the stained glass man from that. Luxo Jr. I have all these with me, so I'll show them all later. Okay. Luxo Jr. nominated for Academy Award. Red's Dream. Tintoy won the Academy Award. I should be saying some other things along the way here. Most of these up till about here were done on VAXs, Suns, and a computer called a CCI, which you may not have heard of, computer consoles, which is about a 5 MIPS machine. Thought it was a real screamer. And this was too, Tintoy. Another thing I'd like to point out is the complexity of these pictures. This picture, for example, has 2.5 million polygons in it, just because I want to calibrate you against other things you hear about out there. And this is Knick-Knack, which is our newest piece. Now, at the same time we were doing that, the industry as a whole was chugging along kind of at this level, and the wireframe level, and they graduated up to shaded polygon level. And what I'm talking about here is sort of the mass marketplace. You could always, spend a lot of money to get the high-end stuff. But this is sort of it's thinkable to spend the money range graphics. This is shaded polygon level, and this is basically where a lot of computer generated graphics is at today, about here. And the high end of the real-time geometry machines can do about like this today. This is quadric surfaces. In other words, it's not represented with polygons, it's actually a smooth surface. And that's about the limit of what you can do in real time. But we think this is what people want. Now, if you'll notice, the last 4 pictures all had exactly the same geometry. And one of the points I want to make today is that geometry is really not the hard part of making a picture, it's kind of the easy part. The hard part is all the rest of the stuff that it takes to make up a picture. The content of the form, okay? Or what we call the shading, or the appearance factors. Okay? So, the message I have tonight is a real simple one. Jonathan's more or less already said it, and that is that all of the pictures, this quality picture and all those pictures that we've spent the last 10 years making and getting famous for can be done on PCs now. That's the message. And I'm going to explain how it works and how that's possible. And one of the easiest parts of the explanation is just raw horsepower is now here. Most of those, if you listen carefully, most of those pictures that we've made in the past were made on 5 MIPS or less machines, if you forget that special case of the Cray. I went out finally and bought a PC for myself a few months ago. Now this is a former PC, I was a snob, I was a workstation snob. I looked down at those silly little toys and wouldn't have anything to do with them. But that changed this last year, that equation changed. And I now have a PC sitting on my desk which is about a 7 or 8 MIPS machine, PC compatible, which is more powerful than the computers used to make any of these pieces I've just shown you. Okay. That's an important step. And that's one of the reasons that RenderMan is possible. Okay. Now, not only is, let me back up just a second. Not only is there enough horsepower here now so that we can use desktop personal computers for making really great pictures, but the infrastructure is in place. It's one thing to know the technology, it's another thing to have the technology in a usable form for the platform of interest. So this thing that we've already referred to several times as RenderMan is that piece of infrastructure which I believe will become part of every desktop machine from here on out, okay, to make it possible for making pictures of this quality. And the third very important thing is that people are actually using the infrastructure and the desktop computers in real products today. And I'll mention some of these. For example, CADKey is perhaps the best known or one of the best known 3D PC CAD companies. And this is what their output used to look like. Now I can tell you what this is supposed to be. This is a blade, a propeller blade or impeller blade of some sort, and the nose part there is made of brass, and the rest of the body is made of chromed steel. Now, can you see that in your mind? Well, maybe you can, but it's a lot easier just to hand the picture over and say, this is what it looks like. Okay? So CADKey is one of the first, I believe it was the first, in fact, PC company, PC software vendor company that incorporated the RenderMan rendering system that I'm going to tell you about into their product line so that you can get pictures like this on your personal computer. Similarly, this is the way AutoCAD used to look from Autodesk. And then they graduated to AutoShade to give you pictures like this. And they are now incorporating RenderMan. So from the same database, you can get this. And that will be out shortly. And here's another similar sequence. I think this is also AutoCAD. The kitchen, flat shading, rendered with RenderMan. Okay. Now let me just show you some more examples. You'll notice already I've used, usually it's product design. Something to do with design seems to be the place where people want to do the best pictures. They either want to render the best looking page they can in full color desktop publishing, or they want to show off a product that doesn't exist yet to its full advantage to make design decisions, and so forth. So here's drill. Here's another version of the same drill. Notice the handle's motion blurred. And all these are made on PCs. But I want to use that, let's say personal computers. I mean Macs as well as PCs, okay? These IBM PCs, incompatibles. Now, why this guitar is in this particular location, I don't know. But okay, that was product design. This is architecture. Interior design. AutoCAD used RenderMan to generate their documentation. Well, the covers for the documentation, at least. Okay, and this is another example of desktop publishing. And I put this up here for several reasons. One is, Jonathan already alluded to something. I want to sort of hammer it in, and that is, you know, once you've digitized the desktop publishing idea, and that's what's happened in the last several years, then there's no reason not to go all the way and start adding 3D to it. So, how many of you know about Siebold conferences? Oh, good. Well, Jonathan Siebold has this annual conference. It's where everybody gets together once a year and says, let's talk about how the industry is going to develop during the next year. So I got up at Jonathan's request and told everybody that what I just said, that, gee, now that you've just about finished digitizing the color desktop publishing business, you're ready for 3D. And you're ready for the idea of RenderMan so that you can start integrating full three-dimensional objects and scenes into your page layouts. And I could sort of see the eyes glass over, and the thought went zinging right across the top of the audience without much registration in the eyeballs. So Jonathan Siebold got up and said, now, 5 years ago, John Warnock got up and said, told you about this thing called PostScript, and your eyes glazed over exactly the same way. And in fact, that's a good story in several ways. One is that, one reason is because we did model the RenderMan concept very much on PostScript. So let's talk about PostScript for a couple of minutes here. The idea of PostScript was a clever one, but a very powerful one. The idea was to take apart the creation of a page, tease it away from the turning of that concept into black ink on a piece of white paper. Okay? Now I call those two steps modeling and rendering. Okay? The description of the page is the modeling step, and the turning of that description into ink on paper is called rendering. They use different terms in desktop publishing. Of course, they say page layout is the modeling step, and you send your layout to an RIP to get it turned into a bitmap. Okay? But the idea is the same as what I'm going to talk about in 3D. Okay, we've teased apart the layout, the design, the creation of the page from the boring step of turning that description into ink. And the way it was done was the Adobe people dropped this thing called PostScript in the middle so that page layout programs would output PostScript descriptions. In other words, you would describe your page in this PostScript language. And you were done. The writer of the software was done. The user of the software was done. Because since it was in PostScript, they would know that there was a machine somewhere that would turn that description into ink on paper. Now, usually that was a little processor buried in a laser writer or some similar device that knew how to read PostScript languages and turn it into black ink on white paper. Now, the RenderMan concept is exactly the same idea, except taken to 3D. The idea is to separate the description of a scene, a three-dimensional scene, such as this room, separate that step from the boring, tedious step of turning that description into a bunch of colored pixels on a raster someplace that you can look at. Okay. So, to use our words again, the idea of RenderMan is to separate the modeling step where the creativity occurs from the rendering step, which is anything but creative. It's just a dumb grunt job. Okay? And the way we did it was we dropped this thing called RenderMan in the middle between those two processes, so that you as a designer of a product or a page even, this happens to be a two-page layout, by the way, or a building or the interior of a building or whatever, car, you can think about design only. You can raise your conceptual level in order of magnitude, so you're thinking about design only, and you don't have to think about how that design is going to get turned into a bunch of colored pixels. Okay? If you're the author, if you're a software vendor, all you have to think about is how to write a description of a scene into the RenderMan language, because it's a language, just like PostScript is a language. Knowing full well that somewhere there's going to be a machine that can take a RenderMan description and create a bunch of pixels for you, and either put those pixels on a monitor, color monitor, or on a piece of film, or on a color paper output printer, or a video recorder. And that's the idea. It's really that simple. Now, in fact, when I say it, it sort of seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious for a lot of years that that's what you do. For a lot of years, people who wrote the modeling programs, that included us, doing the things that you've seen, we didn't think about modeling being separate from rendering. When you made this program that you described a scene to, in order to see what you'd done, you wrote a little routine off the side that turned your description into pixels. It was all one big monolithic program. And it didn't even occur to us until very recently that this was just like the PostScript situation, and we could tease those two very hairy but very different processes apart, and by doing so enable an industry. And I think that's what we've done. In fact, I'll be a little stronger about it. I think the 90s, what's going to distinguish the 90s from before is that this is the decade when pictures on a computer becomes the majority. We'll use the majority of the cycles on a desktop machine. In other words, we will start to relate to our machines through pictures almost totally. The computations that we invoke through the interface will become a decreasingly small percentage of the cycles used. That's on the desktop machines. In order to make that possible, we have to have things like PostScript in place for the 2D, RenderMan in place for the 3D, and some other things in place. Windowing systems are another good example of what I mean by infrastructure. Pieces that will just always be there when you plug a machine in and start to use it. One of the features of RenderMan, I don't even want to call it a feature. It's like this is so core to the idea of making pictures that I don't want to call it a feature. It somehow diminishes the idea. I've already made the point that describing the geometry is the easy part. If you look at this picture, there are 4 teapots. The geometry is the same in all 4 cases. The interest of this picture comes from the different appearances of those 4 identical geometries. Okay. For a lot of years in computer graphics, in fact for the last 15 years, the majority of papers at something like SIGGRAPH were devoted to solving the appearance problem. We didn't know that's what we were doing, but that's what, in retrospect, I can see that's what we were doing. We were trying to find a single formula with which one could rapidly compute the appearance of something, like a teapot, and have it look real. So you'd hear things like flat shading and Phong shading and Garot shading and Torrance Sparrow shading and so forth. All those were attempts at coming up with a simple, easy to compute approximation to the problem of illumination. Now the real solution is to integrate the billions of photons that are flowing in from all directions at all times from all the light sources and get the exactly right answer, but we can't compute that much. Only God can compute that. It's highly parallel and there's lots of separate processes going on. So our idea was, gee, we're never ever, our experience for all those, from all those years of making those movies was there is no such thing as a single formula that captures the lighting equation or approximates it accurately enough. So let's do what we've always done with computers, and that is when you've got a very hard problem, come up with a language to describe the problem, and then it's up to the person who uses the language to be as detailed in his description as he wishes to be. That gives you enough variability to cover all the cases you're probably interested in. It also gives you the variability to compute fast when you don't care about accuracy and give up on speed when you want accuracy. So what we did was add a shading language to RenderMan. It's a language for describing the appearance of things. We broke out of this idea of using a single formula and just said, that'll never work, let's use a whole language. So built into the RenderMan idea is this language for describing the appearance of things. And when you want to change the appearance of something, you just write a little piece of code, maybe about that long, 10 lines. We call these little pieces, these little programs, shaders. If you want to change the look of the teapot, you just plug in a different shader. And that's what we've done here. I've got a bunch of examples of where the geometry stays the same and we've just plugged in a different shader. So in this case, we've got a transparent glass shader, a blue marble shader, a corroded copper shader, and a wireframe, well, gold wireframe shader. That was a 2-page layout from Dr. Dobbs's journal. Here's an elephant with 3 different shaders and 3 more, well, 2 more. Rosewood, hammered pewter, and blue marble. And again, the geometry stays the same. All I'm doing is just picking through a menu of different shaders that have been written. Let me try to give you an idea of how versatile that idea is, of a shader is. We went around Pixar a few months ago to get together interesting shaders that people had written so that we could hand them out basically to potential customers. And discovered there were 780 shaders had been written in a few months. In other words, it's just so easy that people just whip together ideas and try them out. And since it's a language, there's basically no obvious limit to the combinations of things you can try and looks you can get. One consequence of that is, I believe, a whole new business. And that business will be the supplying of shader catalogs to the rest of us. We don't want to sit around and play with this language, okay? You'll buy a disk and it'll have, we call these things appearance libraries, by the way. You'll buy a disk and there'll be, a simple way to sort through a disk and pick out blue marble or rosewood or pewter and just say, put that shader on that object, put this shader on that object, add these 2 shaders together and put it on that object, and so forth. There'll be a whole business. Again, the PostScript metaphor goes through. In the PostScript world, the desktop publishing world, the analog is the font. There are all these, since PostScript allows one to change fonts, there is a business for supplying fonts to desktop publishing. The analog here will be shader libraries and other things that I'll talk about later, but that's at least one. Same geometry, just change the shader. This happened to be done on a PS2 when Intel came out with their new i860, and they wanted to show it off at a Comdex, so they asked us if we could throw together RenderMan in 2 weeks on their wizard board that's loaded with i860s and show it in the IBM booth, and we did. This is it. And by the way, I brought this demo with me. I've got a whole stack of these discs up here so that you can take it home and try it out. Let me say something about before you just take these things. These really probably won't do you much good if you don't have a 386 or above. Okay, it'll run on 286, but it's kind of a little too pokey. And the more memory you have, the better, of course. And if you have VGA, it'll work on VGA, but it won't look like this. It'll look like VGA. So if you've got, what I'd like it for is for people who have 386s with, like 4 megabytes and a target board, that kind of combination to get the first of these disks. I've got a lot of them up here, and then all the rest of you can take them. Okay, And then we'll start pushing on the manufacturers to make VGA show off pictures better than it does. Okay. There are several ideas out there, by the way, to do that. Okay. So these are up in a box here, and you can get them later. I just wanted to put the caveat with it. Okay. Well, what you'll find on that disk, by the way, is this little program that lets you choose whether you want a marble pencil or a pewter pencil or a transparent pencil or an embossed pencil and so forth. And you can select the body type and the lead type and the eraser type and the ferrule type. And then push a button and let it go render for you. And there are also some pre-stored pictures from Tin Toy and elsewhere on there for you to look at. Okay, now here's something else you can do. We got this, Brunswick gave us a copy of their logo with Jaggies and all. And we got some of these stickers from the bowling world. And we built this map called a bump map. I'll say something about that in a minute. And combine it with some very simple geometry to get this. Totally synthetic bowling pin. Okay. Now let me back up and show you. This is a bump map. You know, a real bowling pin has got nicks and cuts and scratches all over it. And if you don't put the nicks and cuts and scratches on it, it doesn't look like a bowling pin. It looks like a computer-generated bowling pin. A platonic bowling pin. So a bump map, how many people know about texture maps? Let's start there. How many people know what a texture map is? Not enough. Okay, so a texture map is a real simple idea that's extremely powerful. The easiest way to think about it is it's the inverse process from Mercator projection. Everybody knows the Mercator projection is where you take the map of the globe of the Earth and you unwrap the globe on a piece of flat paper. One of the ways to do that is the Mercator projection. Now, texture mapping is the opposite. You take a flat picture and you wrap it back onto some three-dimensional surface in order to give that three-dimensional surface great apparent complexity. Okay. You can do that for the colors on a surface. You can do it for, you can do it for bumps and scratches on a surface also. Or you can do it for reflections on a surface. It's essentially a lookup table idea. It's a little bit harder than a lookup table, but you can think of it that way. This is what the bump map for that bowling pin looks like, where the whites are interpreted as low spots and the blacks are interpreted as high spots. And you can fake the rendering algorithm out into believing that the surface actually changes direction. The surface normal actually changes direction at those spots, and it'll make the light do the right thing. And then we took a bunch of these pictures and a bunch of these objects and made this scene, which is cover of our book. Render Man Companion. That's why it's called Textbook Strike. And the shape of this book happens to be the same shape as Postscript. And it's published by Addison Wesley, who also did Postscript. I think you're getting the theme here. This is a whole lot like Postscript. Here is a combination of shaders that some of guys at Pixar did for fun. We were trying to find a RenderMan logo. This is not it, but this is one of the contributions. And this is a scene from Red's Dream. Now, I have this here because for several reasons. One, it's very complex. 40 million polygons. But the real reason it's here is because of the following story. I told you I bought my PC. Well, I ventured into my first PC conference, Stuart Alsop's La Costa conference a few months ago. And I was sitting there in the audience, getting ready to give us a talk about RenderMan. And a vice president, big senior vice president of IBM stood up, James Canavino, head of all workstations and all personal computers. And he showed this picture. And he said, "You will soon have this on your personal computer." Okay, and the guy next to me, who didn't know who I was, leaned over and went, "Yeah, sure." So I want to explain why that's not such a far-fetched idea. Okay, I think why he was found that hard to believe was if he had to start from scratch and generate that scene himself, he didn't know how to do it. But here's how you do it. You wouldn't do it yourself, okay? Modeling a bicycle is a hard thing to do. In fact, modeling is a very hard problem in and of itself. Forget about turning the model into a bunch of pixels. Describing something with geometrical terms is a hard problem. So what I think is going to happen is another analogy to the font situation for PostScript, is that in the rendering situation there will be people who provide 3D clip art. In other words, catalogs of 3D models. Because I don't want to make a bicycle model, and I bet you don't either. You'd rather just go get one that somebody else already did for you. Now, suppose you had, I like to call these things ECATs, electronic catalog. You have an ECAT that's got bikes on it. That's all it has, just bike models. Not colored bikes and not rendered bikes, but just bike models. Models are just geometric descriptions, right? They exist in some computer-readable form, but you can't see them. Okay. And you put this disk on your PC. Well, first of all, let's step back a little bit. First, you put an ECAT in that has room designs on it. And maybe you pick off the room design called box. So you've got 3 walls, a roof, and a floor. And you say, put that there, and your program provides you, probably lets you move the camera around a little bit. That's not very hard to write, or very hard to use, right? Then you pick out an ECAT that has floor coverings in it. And there's carpets of different kinds, and there are wooden floors, and there's a checkerboard floor. So you pick checkerboard floor, and this is all just by pointing and pushing, right? Choose that checkerboard and put it over there on that floor. That's not hard. And it might let you choose the colors of the tiles, something like that. So I choose black and white, put them up there. Then you might put in your ECAT for wall coverings. And there's different kinds of wall coverings, stucco and some wood siding in the back. And you put wood siding here and whatever those other walls have on those walls. And you can choose the colors. And maybe you can choose the matte or glossiness of the result. That's not hard. And then you put in your ECAT for bicycles. And there's a mountain bike in there, and there's a racing bike. And you say, I want that racing bike, let's see, there, and there, and make that one green, and that one yellow, and that one red, and so forth. That's not hard. And I want a mountain bike here and there. And you've done the model. Now you just say, okay, render man, go do it for me. And you have your picture. That wasn't hard. I think that's very doable. In fact, I think it's exactly how it's going to turn out. I think there's going to be a whole market of people supplying those catalogs I just described. And what makes it all work is that this piece of infrastructure is in place called RenderMan. It makes people focus on the really hard problem, which is modeling, instead of on this, not this equally hard problem, but in a different direction, which is rendering. Rendering is a really hard problem, but we know how to do it. What we'd like to do is have everybody else go off and solve the modeling problem. I think solving the modeling problem is going to take decades, and there will be hundreds of products come out that specialize on different parts of the modeling problem. And that's the industry that I'm talking about enabling with the RenderMan concept. And I don't have a name for it either. I was trying a new one this afternoon. See what you think. I said, now desktop publishing, what's the 3D movement animated version of that? And what we call the business, one of the side businesses at Pixar is making film and videos for hire. What do we call that? Well, we call it production. It's what it's called in Hollywood. That's what it's called in video world. So what about desktop production? It's just sort of blah enough, but general enough to maybe get it. I mean, desktop publishing's got about the same pizzazz. We've tried desktop animation, but that sounds like little cartoons, and we want it to be bigger than that. And we tried desktop movies, but that sounds maybe a little too flighty. And desktop visualization, well, visualization's been so abused it hardly means anything anymore. Still looking, in other words. I can tell by your rousing response that maybe desktop publishing production is probably not it either. Okay. I have this in here this is a cover for Macworld, but it's also got some tintoy in there to cue me in that it's about time to start showing some movies. But it seems like I stuck something else in here. Let's see what it is. Oh, not that. I mean, you can look at that. Yeah. I just want to show you a painting I did the other day on my PC. This is it's actually two photographs, one of a brick wall and one. You know what? Part of an appearance library is you've got to supply textures to people so they can just say, put that brick wall there and that asphalt floor there, and you know. So this is a couple of textures that we were working on for our appearance libraries. And I just used a paint program to kind of smudge these two textures together. Now, whether you like the piece or not, it's not the point. What I was trying to get you to think about is this thing I get asked questions about all the time, and that is, can't you fake people out with photographs now? I said, absolutely you can. You know, I don't think it's a problem. I think we've been faking people out in time all the time. It's called editing, and we allow it to happen all the time. Everything you watch on TV or in the movies has been edited, and we let people do that to us. The same thing is going to start happening spatially now. People will start editing in space, and you, as a good citizen, need to be aware of it. Here's a case where I touched maybe 5% of the pixels, but I think it's my piece all the same. So I call it photo finish at the brickyard. Okay, let's put up the first of all, before I show you the videotapes, are there any questions sort of about RenderMan instead of about animation? Yeah?
You're talking a lot about the similarities between PostScript and RenderMan. But one thing that PostScript had was Apple. Who do you have to generate the type of following?
Well, that's a absolutely right on question. I mean, I can answer it glibly, and let me answer it glibly first, and then I'll give you a serious answer. What PostScript had was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs walked in to Adobe and said, you don't want to make that terminal or whatever it is they were going to make at the time. He says, what you want to do is sell PostScript. And they took his advice and also did the laser writer for Apple and turned on that business. Absolutely, just having a good idea is not enough. You've got to finish up the logic there, by the way, I guess you know Steve Jobs is a heavy investor in my company. And he said, I think that should be like PostScript, you know, go do it. So we've got that part of the equation. But you're absolutely right. If it's not in some widely usable form, available form, then it doesn't matter how good the idea is. So I think you're going to see it develop in a lot of ways. So the one thing I want you to be clear already about is that there are already large companies who are integrating RenderMan into their product line right now. Last week at NCGA, National Computer Graphics Association, in our booth we had 7 PC and Mac vendors showing off their products with RenderMan built into them. AutoCAD and CAD-Key, just those two companies alone, represent over 65% of the PC CAD-CAM business. So that makes RenderMan the de facto standard in that sub-market already. Okay. That's still not the laser writer for RenderMan.
That's the office.
Okay. What I hope happens, and we're working hard at it, is that some of these there's 2 places it might work out. One is either the RenderMan gets incorporated into the operating system, which means a big vendor has to be behind it, or a big hardware vendor has to be behind it, or a big software vendor has to be behind it. Or, as with PostScript, the output device that everybody starts to use for color output has RenderMan renderers built into it. So we're pursuing all of those. We're pursuing the major vendors, third-party software vendors, the hardware vendors, the software and the operating software vendors, operating system software vendors, and the color output device vendors. And I think somewhere in there, the magic is going to happen. One of the reasons it's going to be a little longer before the laser writer equivalent comes out is because it just costs too much still to do color. But if you've been tracking it as closely as I have been, that's going to change dramatically soon. I mean, just a few years ago, it was $50,000 for quality color output. It's down to 10, and we'll be dropping on down into 5 and below, and then the market takes off, is my guess.
Price and time. In that bicycle analog, when I hit the RenderMan button, how long before it was finished? And then what would it cost me if I get it for my PC?
Okay. Well, just to answer you literally, that bike shop would take you a long time. Okay?
How long?
Oh, hours.
After I've got all the
Yeah.
elements,
Yeah.
then I hit render.
Yeah. It would take you a long time. Okay? And that's the general answer, is the more complex the picture, the longer it takes. Okay?
Right.
Well, let me finish the timing answer, because I think that's important. For one thing, it's not, I can't do it in real time. That's what you really want, right? You like to just change your mind and it's different. Okay? Not for a few years, guys. It's just, the machines just aren't that fast. Not even the Crays can go that fast. It's too hard so far. I think it will happen sooner or later. The real-time machines are getting better and better all the time, but they're still orders of magnitude away from those kind of renderings. Orders of magnitude. But they're getting better. They're into the 10,000 to 100,000 polygons per picture realm right now, just to kind of calibrate you. What I like to do, instead of saying, since it's hard, if I don't know which machine you're running on or which picture you're rendering, I can't give you a good answer. What I like to do is say, how long would the alternative take? How long, and we've gone out and we've asked graphic artists how long it would take them to render one of these architectural renderings that you've seen done on a PC. Okay? The PC rendering might have taken something like half an hour to an hour, something like that, depending on which PC you have. The renderers, the graphic artists have all said something like a week or half a week or 2 weeks, those kind of answers. So it's the difference between doing it and not doing it is the way I look at it, not how long it takes. If you're getting ready to make a product presentation to the person in your company that's going to either make or break your product line, or give you a go or no-go on the idea, and you want to convey the reality of that product as strongly as you can without actually spending, if it's a car, $1 million for a model, or several $100,000 for a computer mock-up or something like that, are you willing to spend 30 minutes to an hour to have a machine do it? And I said, yeah, I think you are. And if that's the case, then there's a market for design. And the wonderful thing, and the reason I think right now is the time to bring this into the consciousness of the PC world, is that once you've bought into the idea, everything changes, it stays the same. In other words, once you have the model and the software written that listens to the model, it all just gets faster and cheaper. There's no sudden huge change required 1 year down the line because the hardware got faster. That's the beauty of the idea. I did get one number in here just so that you know exactly what some of these things take. Let's see, which one was it? It was the office scene, the Autodesk office scene. Had potted plants and things on the wall and papers on the table. Took 25 minutes on a 25 megahertz 386. Just to give you a, okay? Price. What? You need floating point. I mean, you can do it integer, but it'll kill you. Okay? That's another thing I should have said. If you're going to take one of these disks, it's highly advisable to have a coprocessor. Yeah.
The reason a lot of people want speed probably is to find out whether they've made a mistake or not.
Good point. Let me talk to that.
Can you see part of the image after it's put together
Well, that's it. I'm glad. Thank you very much. I forgot to make a point I wanted to make. And that is, I've been talking about all these really great pictures you can make with RenderMan. Okay? What's nice about RenderMan is you can just turn the quality knob down. You can even imagine there being a dial on the user interface screen. All the way to line drawings if you want, and the same interface still works. So, yeah, if you want a quick and dirty, just to see if the composition is more or less right, and you've got the colors more or less right. And by the way, I think that is how we work. We don't hit the go do it in full glory button until we're really ready for it. You make a lot of rough sketches. So, good point. Price, Mac RenderMan is what we announced last week. It's the RenderMan that runs on the Mac, obviously. It comes with several things. It has a way of queuing up jobs and keeping track of what's on the queue, so you can have the thing run overnight and do a movie for you. It's got a set of shaders. It's got a little shader library like I was describing. It's about 5 processes that it has together. This product costs $7.95. On a PC side, we tend to go through vendors. In other words, for example, Autodesk and CAD-Key and Intergraph, Bentley, Evolution. What they do is they incorporate our renderer in their product and pay us a license fee. So the number you pay in the renderer, in that case, is what you pay for their product. So it varies from product to product. But our idea is to make rendering real cheap. Just keep pushing it down. Just real cheap, so it becomes a no-brainer that you put it in your machine. And a no-brainer for vendors to come by and build products that let you use it. That's the idea. Yeah?
When am I going to walk into the local discount store and buy a home video game machine with RenderMan?
Well, it'll be a while, for I think obvious reasons. Video is real time. Video games are real time. And although this RenderMan will run at real time, it seems to me like what you'd really want is to have a system that will let you crank up the knob and do the really gorgeous pictures to take full advantage of the system. It's kind of hard for me to understand how you're ever going to use the shading library concept, for example, in an interactive video game, until those machines get fast enough, and they will, but it may be a while. I'm guessing, to answer your question, literally, 10 years maybe. But there's a lot of stuff between here and there, a lot of pictures to be made that I want to make between here and there. I want to make movies, that's what I've been wanting to do all along. One more question.
You said that the real thing that's going to take a couple of decades to work out is modeling. What is the challenge there, and what's being done right now to push against the outside of the envelope?
Okay. Modeling is hard for a variety of reasons. One is there's just so many things to model that people want to make pictures of. So just the sheer size of the problem is one of the problems. A lot of the things that people want to model, we don't know how, or I don't think we have the right tools yet. For example, human beings. Human beings are hard. And you'll see the baby in Tin Toy. The baby's the only attempt we've ever made at doing a human being, and it's still kind of cartoony. In fact, it's monstrous.
That's what you wanted.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's supposed to be a monster in that case. Monstrous, what do we mean by monstrous? Well, we mean not kind of like a human, but not quite, The closer you get, it's well known in animation, the closer you get to a human being, the pickier humans get about accepting what you're offering. I mean, we humans will accept a cartoon of a human being, but if you start getting close in your simulation, then people want you to be dead on, so they don't have to look at a monster. You don't have to look at a monster this morning. The baby has 40 muscles modeled in its face, by the way, just to tell you about the complexity of that. But if you think about hair and cloth, that's hard. Another really hard part about modeling is physics. And by the way, I include animation in modeling. That's just modeling through time. we spend a lot of time, all the physics you'll see in the pieces I show today is put there by our animator, which is a waste of his talent. Keeping the feet on the floor, keeping the hand on the doorknob when it opens, keeping from going through the floor when you walk, those kind of things. That's action, reaction. That's just physics. There's no reason a computer couldn't be doing that, except for it takes lots of horsepower. And the horsepower is just not there yet for it. But that will be folded in over time as part of the modeling problem. Yeah?
Could you clarify a little more about exactly who owns what part of this technology? I mean, the basic idea of putting an intermediate description in between the modeling and the rendering doesn't sound like something anybody could really own.
It's not an ownable idea, is it? No. We gave that idea to the industry, basically, by announcing the RenderMan interface spec about 2 years ago. We just got up, had a press conference. There were 20 companies that endorsed it with us, including Sun and DEC and Apple and Prime and Disney and Lucasfilm and Autodesk and a bunch of famous companies stood up with us. Said, this is a good idea. And you can obtain the specifications, about a half-inch thick specification of what that interface looks like for just I think it's $15. It's basically a copying and mailing fee from us. Okay. And so that's a gift. I mean, whether if Pixar were to die tomorrow, it's still a gift that's in place, and I still think an incredibly important piece of the infrastructure of the future. Okay. What we own is a renderer, a program which listens to the which can read a RenderMan description and turn it into RGB pixels, can turn it into color pixels. That's the part we own. But we have been very careful. We watched. I think Adobe made some mistakes with their idea. I don't think the PostScript would have happened if there hadn't been an Adobe. But I think they made some mistakes and alienated some people, so we're trying to learn what they did wrong as well as what they did right. We didn't just say, world, here's a standard. We went out and spent a year talking to 20 some odd companies about the idea, and we went through several drafts, versions 1 and versions 2 of the RenderMan interface spec with these 20 companies who were all leaders in the quality picture business. And their inputs were all incorporated into version 3. And it was version 3 that we handed out to the world and said, okay, here it is. And the people that had helped generate it were the endorsers at the announcement. And to keep it fresh, now we're really clear that we want to keep the number of people in charge of changing the standard small. In fact, we have one guy that it goes through eventually. But we want to be sure there's lots of industry input into that, so we have what's called a RenderMan Advisory Council.
Would it be to create kind of an image library that was scanned in from photographs and being able to interface that with
Very feasible. That's another one of these 3D font ideas. Just catalogs of pictures that you can use as raw material. I think it's absolutely important, absolutely fundamentally important.
You can do that right now?
There's sure. And the answer is yes. I was just trying to say, let's see. See, I think you can use that idea even without RenderMan. That's what I'm getting at. It's just like, that's a great idea no matter what. There ought to just be pictures out there that people can use as raw material. RenderMan would let you use them as textures also if you want to wrap them on the three-dimensional surfaces. So, but you could use them for lots of other things besides. I think people just don't like to be confronted with a blank raw canvas. Some artists do, but most folks don't. In fact, one of the clever things about Adobe Illustrator was the way it's described is you can sit down with a piece of blank paper and use Adobe Illustrator to draw a picture, but they don't ever market it that way. They say, start with a scanned-in image and draw an outline to your scanned-in image with this Adobe Illustrator. In other words, they don't want you to think about starting with a blank piece of paper. It's probably a really clever idea. Start you from something. One of my favorite things, in fact, that picture I just showed you, my little painting of the bricks showing through the asphalt, I think my favorite art form is what I call composing. It's where you take images and you mush them together with matting algebra and paint programs and all kinds of imaging tricks to get a new work of art. Whatever you call that, I call it composing. And I have to have a lot of raw images to start with. That's my inspiration. Okay, let's look at these movies. What I have here is sort of a history since New York Tech. When we did New York Tech years ago, I brought Sunstone with me, which many of you may have not have seen. This is I was done with Eddie M. Schwiller, best artist I've ever worked with. Then we'll see. We'll move to Lucasfilm and see Genesis Demo, Return of the Jedi, Young Sherlock Holmes. I probably have these in the wrong order, but Adventures of Andre and Wally B. A couple of short pieces that you'll have to look at real fast. One of them is the waves. These are some ocean waves that are computer generated. This is true scientific visualization of ocean waves. And then Beach Chair, which is, well, it's about a beach chair. Then we'll come to Pixar and we'll do Luxo Jr., Red's Dream, Tin Toy, and Knick Knack. Okay? So, just a second. This is Ed M. Schwiller. I'll let him talk a minute. Oh, good, he's over. So that was on a VAX at 500 line resolution.
Real time?
Spinning cube in there that you can now do in real time on a ADO. Took us something like 56 hours. Let's go ahead and play that second tape. Don't know. Let's go ahead and play that second tape.
data brought to us by the Bothan spies pinpoints the exact location of the Emperor's new battle station. Admiral Akbar, please.
You can see here the Death Star orbiting the forest moon of Endor. Although the weapon systems on this Death Star are not yet operational, the Death Star does have a strong defense mechanism. It is protected by an energy shield, which is generated from the nearby forest moon of Endor. The shield must be deactivated if any attack is to be attempted. Once the shield is down, our cruisers will create a perimeter while the fighters fly into the superstructure and attempt to knock out the main reactor. General Calrissian has volunteered to lead the fighter attack.
Good luck.
Stop this one, change to third. It's on the next tape. All right. I doubt if most of you were looking at what the computer was doing. Like how many of you watched how the lights interacted with each other during Luxo Junior? I got a hand. Point is that I'll say it again. That was all done on most of those pieces were done on machines with a lot less horsepower than today's PC. And the point is again that now that RenderMan's in place, we can't sell you the artistry, unfortunately, but the tools for making pieces like that are now available, so you can do this on your desktop, whatever you call it. Okay. That's all I have to say, but I'd love to answer questions about anything. Okay.
You mentioned physics before. In that red screen, looked like there was a lot of stuff involved bouncing around.
Well, I exaggerated a little bit. There are several things that I can point to, probably all 3 or 4 things that were done procedurally. The unicycle pedals, there was a program that actually kept the wheels going around instead of the animator having to do that. The thing on Tintoy's, the little plume on Tintoy's helmet, that's a procedural model, so the animator doesn't have to think about that, and so forth. Oh yeah, there's a disc up here. Again, if you don't have a 386 with a coprocessor, it's probably not worth hurting yourself. And Jonathan, I'll leave the whole box if there is one left with Jonathan, so that those of you you can get copies from him. Oh, sure. It's just there's no, it's just a demo.
That's where else can you get one?
What?
Tyga?
Yeah, Tyga.
Step over.
Yeah. Let me say something about that. I was just asked about Tyga. I've mentioned RenderMan as being part of the infrastructure for the 90s that I think is going to be a fundamental part of making pictures on computers. Windows systems are also in there. PostScript's in there. Figs is in there. There are some other things that just aren't touched at all yet. And just let you chew on this for a while. Imaging, how you move pixels around in any sensible way has not been well treated yet. And one of the pieces of infrastructure that's missing has to do with that. I don't think Tyga's the right answer. Yes?
Me?
Yes.
Okay, I was reading about the Mac package, and do I need to get a separate 3D modeling program from what you're selling? And
yes, RenderMan is not a modeling program.
Okay. Are there any out now that
yeah,
support?
Well, last week at NCGA, there was, Paracomp Swivel 3D will soon generate RenderMan stuff. I don't believe they incorporate the renderer into their product. You still need the renderer as a separate thing. So you'd buy Swivel 3D, for example, and Mac RenderMan, and you'd have the whole set. Let's see.
Will that be an upgrade of the existing 3D?
I don't know.
Right now it doesn't output the right format.
That's right. So I don't know whether it'll be an upgrade or what. I suspect so, but I don't know. Let's see. VIDI. Macromine 3D. Lefco has a board, an accelerator board to make it even go faster. It plugs into a Mac. I think that was the Mac people that demonstrated in our booth last week. And I've already mentioned the PC people, so sort of get a feeling. And a lot more to come. Those are the ones who've announced. Yes?
Can you comment on the prospects for this on the Amiga and the relationship of what you have in relation to the various ray tracing programs that are also in the field?
Well, there are a lot of rendering programs in the field. Let me answer that first part first. Amiga, basically we're talking about computing. So if you've got a computer, it works. But it has not been placed on the Amiga yet.
A numbers question, market size question?
Not market size, it's horsepower.
It's not horsepower, so I don't believe it.
Well, maybe, see, I just learned about PCs last year, right? Tell me what the floating point performance of the Amiga is.
An old 30, an 882.
Same thing? Okay, there's no reason why I should go into the Amiga. So maybe there's something you should do. One of the things I've always admired about them was that they were video compatible. I don't understand why the other companies aren't. Why you can't get video just straight out and put it on your tape recorder. I don't get it, just really don't. In fact, one of the surprising things to me about a PC was I got this 7 or 8 inch machine sitting there, and VGA as the output. I mean, that's, I was telling Kathy Cook, that's like buying a really nice stereo system and buying 10 cans for the loudspeakers. It's such a mismatch, I can't believe it. So something has to be done about that soon. And I hope just the raw demand for good color from you guys will make the vendors do something about it.
Wouldn't that be a bottleneck on the display? Like, for instance, if you need a really high quality display to show off your really good graphics, then that's going to be out of the price range for most people.
Well, that's why I think it needs to change real fast. See, the reason I think it's such a mismatch to have VGA on that wonderful horsepower is VGA graphics is what we were using 15 years ago. It's color map 8-bit graphics. That's 15-year-old technology. There's no reason this stuff should be dirt cheap and made really available just by sheer volume. I think what's missing is just maybe lack of understanding of what RGB is. I don't know. Apple has 32-bit quick draw. I'm curious to see what the PC world is going to do to compete with it. Otherwise, all the real color applications are going to go to Apple, and I don't think that can last. By the way, I've seen lots of things for making it real cheap, so I think it's just around the corner. But you're going to have to demand it. Not just higher resolution, that doesn't solve the problem. RGB, 3-dimensional color as opposed to 1-dimensional color. It's not the number of bits that counts either, it's the philosophy of programming that counts. Yes?
What language is your renderer written in, and is it C? And can you formulate it so that if you had 100 processors, then you could come up with your picture 100 times faster?
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the nice things about graphics. You can always just do each scan line separately, or if you're doing a movie, you can do each frame separately. It's not, you parallelize that way, not by parceling up each process up into parallel. That's too hard. Rendering doesn't happen to be that kind of problem, much to people's surprise. There's a huge sort that's involved someplace when you do a picture. Yes?
In the renderer that you've been distributing to OEMs, can you just give us a little more information about what level that's at? Do you use a particular type of ray tracer? Do you have radiosity level, or these global?
All those things. You've got a language for describing the appearance of things, so you can do any of those. Right. We hope we've designed it so you can do anything anybody wants to do. And by the way, I should say something about ray tracing. You can do ray tracing. We think ray tracing, by what people usually mean when they say that term, is a pig of an algorithm. And so we offer all kinds of ways where you get the equivalent look for a lot less computation time. But if you want to do ray tracing, sure. Yeah, well, the main thing we want is for everybody to be making pictures. Okay, that's the reason for the interface. We hope you will think our renderer is so darn versatile And there are so many ECASs you can buy that feed into it, and so many modelers that generate rib files, they're called, by the way, RenderMan interface byte streams, rib files, that you'll buy ours. It's hard to write renders. There are some things that are very hard to do, like motion blur. But I should say something about motion blur. Everything you saw up there was motion blurred. And after you've spotted what it means not to have motion blur, it's very annoying when you see people who don't take care of it. Unfortunately, broadcast video is rampant with temporally aliased pieces. You can spot aliasing in time because it looks like this. And getting rid of the strobing is called temporal anti-aliasing, or what we call motion blur. Yes, Green. Don't believe it. Yes, I mean, that's the advantage of the shading language. You can put as much detail into the appearance as you're willing to do. What's the ultimate progression? Well, what we hope to achieve is we want, I think a lot of people think that high-tech folks live off in a white tower and don't care. Well, let me finish. I was at Xerox PARC when they did the personal computer, and Xerox said no. And people at Xerox PARC cried because Xerox would not take their white tower ideas and get them out to the world. We just very simply want to take this technology that we've worked on for 15 years and make it the thing that people do every day. So that's our goal. We want to make a living while we do it too, of course. But I think that follows. Yeah. Yes.
On the Mac platform, visual information has had dimensions for a few years now, and Stratavision's come out, and there's a couple others.
Stratavision, I failed to mention, yes. Mm-hmm.
How would you say dimensions compare to, or I should say, how does Pixar compare to the visual information product? Are they compatible?
Oh yeah, well they were in our booth. They're going to be compatible with RenderMan. Yeah.
Is it just different languages that they're using to?
Well, the easiest way to think about it is, if you were a modeling company, you could either solve all that people have spent 10 years solving, or you could just work on the modeling problem and spit out rib files and let us, hopefully, solve it for you. But somebody else did solve the rendering problem. You don't even have to think about it if you just spit out the right calls. Okay? You can just say motion blur. You don't have to figure out how to do motion blur. It's done for you.
So you think that you would be an adjunct to their existing product?
Yeah, I think of them as modelers. I think what I want to do is encourage all these people who are great at modeling to become even greater at modeling and leave the turning of the pixels the descriptions and pixels to us. Yeah.
What is Pixar's future plans in the hardware world? Will we see extensions to the CAPS architecture? Will there be a firmware implementation?
I didn't put up a slide, I usually do, but we make a very clean distinction at Pixar between geometry-based picture making and sampling-based or imaging-based picture making. And everything I've been talking about today is geometry-based. Okay? Everything. There's this whole other world out there. I briefly mentioned it when I said there's a lack of standards in imaging. There's this whole other world that I hadn't even spoken about at all tonight that half our company's devoted to, and we build a thing called a Pixar image computer that accelerates sample-based picture making. It's complementary to geometry-based. On the geometry side, we thought about building accelerator boards to plug into PCs, to personal computers to accelerate RenderMan, but we decided not to do that for the simple reason that can't stay ahead of the curve. It's changing so fast that by the time, it takes a real heavy investment, $1 million or $2 million to get a board out and market it and all that. And by the time you've done that, you've been left in the dust by the next processor chip that's come out. So rather than try to play that game, there are other companies that are much better at that than at us. We're betting on the processors themselves, just general plain old vanilla processors getting fast enough in the next 2 years, starting now. I mean, some of them already are, but just the one that's generally out there, you know, the hump of the bell curve, will be so fast that why bother with accelerators unless you really need to spend that kind of money to get the extra horsepower. There's no reason not to go ahead right now. 2 more questions, Jonathan says. Yes, sir?
Do you have plans for an interface for animators to work directly with the interface language?
No. Again, this is what we think it's the role of the third-party vendors to supply, like Macromind, Swivel 3D, and so forth. I think of animation as part of the modeling process. Really tough problem. Devote your entire company's intellectual prowess to that problem. Forget about the rendering. Okay, we've given you a language where you can do animation, that kind of animation. You just have to write the front end to it. But somebody has to do that writing. That's the industry we're trying to enable, exactly. Yes?
Do you expect any applications to stereolithography?
Excuse me?
Do you expect any applications to stereolithography? I might be using an unfamiliar term, but it's scanning to create physical three-dimensional objects.
Oh, that. Oh, yeah. No, I think of that as 3D rendering, you know, real 3D rendering. It seems to me like the modeling problem is the hard part there. There's not much we can contribute to the rendering. It's what you get out of those machines is the result. I don't know how texture mapping applies, or motion blur, or mapping, or any of those things, for example. So to me, it seems like a modeling problem. I should have mentioned, by the way, Knick-Knack, it was a stereo. It's different subject, but Knick-Knack was a stereo movie. It was made in stereo. Okay, I think I better stop. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Well, Business Week once said that the Boston Computer Society General Meeting is the bellwether of new... the bellwether of new technologies and sort of the early indicator of the success of products entering the marketplace. And I would say if the rate at which people scarf down the demo discs tonight is any indication, this is a very, very hot development. We're really very, very pleased to have been able to present it to you tonight. Just a few quick announcements of upcoming BCS events.
I have a question in the nature of, is there a formal definition of RenderMan in the sense that, as far as I understand, there isn't a formal definition of PostScript such that you could say these 2 implementations are only correct if these pixels are exactly, you know, on and these are off.
We thought about how to do that and decided that would just be, that's too hard.
Okay, so two different vendors of renders from the same description, the pictures wouldn't necessarily look, well they might look significantly different.
How we're going to, you know, how do you say it's okay when, how do we allow somebody else to say RenderMan compatible is a difficult thing. Modelers can say it all they want, because basically all they have to do is spit out the rib files. Renders, you have to honor all 92 of the calls. There's only 92 calls for one thing I should mention. It's a real small number of calls. But all 92 have to be honored reasonably. You know, motion blur, you can't just say, he just said motion blur. You can't have a print statement. You know, you've got to actually do it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll be interested to read the definition.
Yeah, well, thousands of copies have been requested. So,
finished studying PostScript through again.
Well, if you read that book, it's a really good description of how RenderMan, what it does.
So that has as much information as the formal specification. I mean,
yeah,
well, maybe
yeah,
not quite as precise.
Costs more.
But
it will cost more. But
that'll give you a better idea.
It's a tutorial book. Yeah, it's a very easy to read book. I didn't have trouble reading it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Sure.
Go off and do some third-party stuff, man.
Okay.
Write the front ends.
Right.
People are hurting for the front ends.
Yes.
I think the front ends are too, they need to be more specialized than they are.
It's niche.
Yeah.
Sure.
Need to be a kitchen.
More standardized and so forth, and I don't really see that fitting into RenderMan.
It's a different thing. It's like geometry and imaging are separate ideas. Right. Different heroes, different math, everything's different.
But in the scientific visualization world and so forth, there are a lot of 3D applications that would benefit by having an interface like RenderMan, yet there are certain functionalities that aren't part of the interface, such as, say, lines, which have an abstract concept, which have no meaning in a photorealistic world. And how do you see merge between kind of
we do lines.
data
We do lines. I try to say
I mean,
that.
you
If you
could,
turn
right,
the
yeah,
quality
sure.
knob all the way down, you got lines. You know,
Right.
So it'll do lines.
Mhm.
It'll do them fast too. But that's not. You know, yeah, I don't want people to go out and buy a line renderer and a polygon renderer and a render man. I want them to have one
You got
thing. You
it.
just turn
Just
his
do
knob
what you
up,
turn
and
down or up.
you as a user decide what quality level you want.
Question. There don't seem to be any more pamphlets out there. Where can we get more?
Pixar.
Address.
Pixar is at 3240 Kerner Boulevard, Kerner. In San Rafael, Rafael, California 94901.
Okay, thanks.
I'll be happy to send it to you.
You remember Brita
Yeah,
from
I do.
Macworld,
Hi.
Alvy. Good to see
See
you.
you.
It was a great talk, Alvy. Thanks
Great
for
seeing
bringing
you.
all those wonderful pictures. I'll come and see you when I get back to
Okay.
school. Good luck to you.
She's dragging me around. I
She sure is. Well, she's like that.
I'm Paul Zagreus,
Paul,
analyst with the Yankee Group here in Boston.
Yeah, I know about the Yankee Group.
And I was wondering if you'd pass that on to your PR firm and get me on your contact Mr. Analyst list so I can get information about the company. I don't currently get information. I just figured it would make sense for me to get on that list.
Will do. Thank you.
I look at this industry as part of the industry as sort of the way the PC was in 1980.
Yeah, I think you too. It's about to burst.
About to go
It's going to be
kaboom.
humongous.
Right.
I just hope we time it right. I think we are, but I'm not sure. You never know. You could miss it by a year and blow it. You know.
What I'd be real curious to know, and I say this, both for professional reasons as well as personal. Where is Steve Jobs going to land?
Good question.
Where is this guy going to land?
Good question.
He seems to
He's
be
got a
bouncing
hard problem.
all over the place.
He has a hard problem to solve. But
No
sister
one-
company, so I don't know. It's his problem. That's his company's problem, and we got our own.
Well, I think you're on the right track.
Thank you. I hope so. It feels right, but there are some funny things that happen out there.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to meet you, Joe Platt. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Joe.
I noticed the credits for RenderMan on Tin Toy and Nick Nick. I was wondering, was that a pre-release version that you were working with?
No, we actually use RenderMan.
Oh.
The same one that you could get on the Mac products right now, or
That was
PC
the-
products. It's the
the
very
third-
same
the
one. I'm
third-
really trying to say that's exactly the same code. It's not a stripped down version. It is the same stuff. Those movies are made with. That's what you get. That's the whole idea. Make
Very
that
good.
available for lots of folks. But it needs front ends, you know.
Yeah.
We're not supplying a front end.
You people have your own, internally your own.
Oh, we have
front
an
ends,
incredible
but-
front end, but it's
you-
it's too hard.
You're not
it's
gonna
not
commercialize any of
No, it's that's why I know how hard the modeling problem is. We've got something that's incredibly sophisticated. It'd be I don't know how to sell it. It takes experts to run it. So there needs to be something that stages people up, lets them get more and more sophisticated in their modeling. You know, so you get what you buy your level.
There's no software right now that would let just anyone create a movie, right?
That's not true. It's not. You'd have to.
You'd have to take the still photos. And
You'd have to buy
all this kind of
somebody's modeler, and there's some really good ones out there. Okay, there are some very good ones. And I guess even on the small machines and certainly on the workstations, there are some incredible modelers out there with animation built into them.
Oh,
also.
they do have animation built in, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
And then somebody has to design. That's the hard part. That's an artist. There's nobody going to supply that one.
Can you put all sorts of text things, PostScript type 2D things?
Well, I think
in
of
those
PostScript
pictures?
as the answer is yes. It's not as smooth as it should be, and I hope that soon I can tell you a really nice interface between PostScript and RenderMan.
Yeah,
that'd be the obvious thing. Why repeat what they've done? Just take the output from PostScript and say, use this as a mat or put a texture on this word. And, you can do it, but it's not as easy as it should be yet.
You said there's only 92 calls?
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about it. It's really simple. Get the book. They're all in the book.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
How long has that book been out?
It's been out since last August, and we were in our second printing now. It's 5,000 copies sold. It's going like hotcakes. It's a good book.
You said these RIF files? No.
RIB, R-I-B.
R-I-B?
Yeah, RenderMan Interface Byte Stream.
Is that the input or the output?
It's a modeling program, spits out an ASCII stream, a RIB file, it's called, and then a renderer reads it. That's one way to do it. Another way is for an application to have a renderer built in. Okay, so you can go both ways.
Now, you talked about putting in your desk disk, your lamps disk, your floor disk, those kind of things.
Kitchen disk, your bathroom disk, your sofa disk, you know.
No, those are like little pieces of RenderMan code.
Yeah, they're
like source code.
I think there are modelers. There are models, the geometry, in other words, that you can buy, and then you buy shaders, which give the appearance of the geometry.
But you
there's sort of an infinity of those things you can imagine. I sort of think about record stores. You go in and buy all the, get what you want, basically.
Well,
they're in RIB format.
You're buying RIB format things.
I think
is that right?
The way it'd be, yeah.
Okay.
It's
and then you
basically I think what you wouldn't care what's on a disk. You'd bring it in, and some easy application would come up on the screen and just give you a picture of what was out there, and you just do point and push. You wouldn't really have to know.
What I'm wondering about is the data management task of those RIP files. How you find them.
Good question. Somebody needs to do something about that.
Well, that's what I was wondering about.
Go do it. There's lots of things.
It's sort of like
that's why enabling an industry means this. It means having people ask those questions and then go off and solve them. If you don't, before nobody's even asking those questions, and they're fundamental. So to me, that's what RenderMan did. It sort of cleared away the weeds so people are starting to ask the right questions, so we can get this industry off and running. And we certainly can't do it all. We're band limited right now. So.
Where does Atmosphere fit in?
Oh, Atmosphere's in there. Atmospheric shaders are one of the kinds of shaders built into RenderMan.
Smoke-filled rooms.
Sure, of course. Anything you've heard of that you can do with computers, you can do with RenderMan. Anything you've heard of?
That's modest.
Could you say a little more of the lowest power sorting out who's doing what in this and who's free to do what? The RenderMan standard is there.
It's public. Yeah.
And so anybody that wants to
build
a competitive product to RenderMan, that is what you have is a software product that takes a RenderMan description, what you call a RIB file. RIB. R-I-B-B.
R-I-B. RenderMan Interface Byte Stream.
And renders it to a picture on your screen or whatever you want to do with that. Yeah. Right. Now, there's nothing in the ownership that proprietary rights keeps anybody else from doing that.
The name is protected.
But a rendering program to make pictures from that description is wide open.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
Well, specifications.
What's that?
A modeler, anybody can use it just by saying so.
Right.
Renderers have to play some rules if they want to say they're RenderMan compatible.
They have to do what?
They have to play some rules, like they have to honor the interface, for example.
Okay.
They can't just have a printf statement that said he just called motion blur. You got to really do it.
To charge royalties on that.
No, that's not what we intend to do. What we intend to do is make royalties off of. I think of it like operating systems. Anybody go write Unix that wants to.
Right.
Why the hell bother? Somebody already did it. It's really hard. Just go buy it.
Okay. But to convert this to pixels, there's some element of that is machine dependent.
That's the question.
Platform.
Well,
the rendering process.
If you run C, if you got C, no, that's the whole point. It's device independent too. It's at some point if you want to display it. Display it now, separate from computation. Very important concept. I should have said something about that.
Right.
Display.
That's another place where there's a layering of the
display is whatever There is no such thing as the display, right?
Right.
What RenderMan spits out is an RGB alpha stream, byte stream.
Okay.
And then what you do with that string of pixels is device dependent. If you got a target board, you got to do something with it. If you got a Vista board, you got to do something different.
Right.
A VGA, got to do something different. You got to squeeze it down to 8 bits for one thing. If you've
Yeah.
got, you
Well,
know,
there's 16-bit VGA boards now. They're standard in the clone market at 1024x768 resolution.
okay, I mean, yeah, you know, but that is device dependent. Somewhere you got to take this byte stream, and RenderMan doesn't care. It says here's the byte stream of the pixels. It's up to you what you do.
So
with
the
it.
output of RenderMan is a description pixel by pixel of what? In 24-bit color? 24-bit RGB?
Again, it's not the number of bits. It's the, but yeah, that's probably the easiest way to answer it. Yeah, 32 bits actually.
32.
RGB alpha.
RGB and what?
Alpha transparency.
Okay.
So you can map pictures together. Then if you want to squeeze that down into, like on that disk, there are 3 drivers that come on that disk. There's a Vista, a Targa. I think there might be several Targas, a 16, Targa 16, and Targa 24.
Okay.
And a VGA on that. You know, just figure that sort of gets a lot of people right there.
Okay. Very good. I'm going to give you a courtesy copy of your kind of art, which there's an article in there about how that's done on the Amiga using 4 or 5 different products to put together.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Quite funny.
Yeah.
But,
I like the fact that Flowery said
No,
the
I
Amiga
mean,
puts out video. Gee, how
no,
intelligent.
The Amiga
Unsolicited
is not,
testimonial.
You know, is not just the 500 consumer machine. It's also the 2000 that has AT bus on it and takes 030 boards galore and easily boosts to 9 megs and so forth.
How many of them are out there?
Well, not that's why I asked you if it was a.
Well, that's, you know, we're a small company,
head count.
so the way we
Right,
we
sure.
choose is the biggest
Right.
ones first, and
Of course, right.
right down the list.
Yeah.
Except next, we do next because of other reasons.
Sure, right. Okay, but if some people who are heavily into the Amiga wanted to cooperate with you,
Oh, sure.
somehow,
Happy to help them get on there. Yeah, I mean, we want it out there. I don't care about the platforms, really. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does Mac RenderMan work on the Mac 2 CI? Or the 2 CX?
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. It's not. But yeah, I'd have to ask. I just don't know, honestly. I mean, they just handed me that yesterday. It's a little rusty. I thought it would run on any. I thought it would run on any of the Mac 2s, but I'm not sure.
Is there
It might. Yeah. You do need memory, though. You know, you're going to need 4, probably, maybe 8.
Is there a name for your output file? The rib file is the object description. Right?
No, it's sort of too simple to have a name. It's just an RGBA alpha, byte string.
Okay.
But we don't have a name for it.
Can a RenderMan task be partitioned into n computational streams so that you could distribute it over a network of PCs?
Yes. But I want to be clear about that. It's not like the right way to think about it is you partition, say, this scan line on that processor, this scan line on that processor, this scan line on that processor, or this frame on that processor, this frame on that processor, that kind of parallelism.
So it's sort of a pixel-driven rather than a array-driven?
They have to share memory then?
Operation?
Yeah, that's probably the problem, because you've got to
The whole model is.
you've got to parcel up the model too, and that's the tricky part, especially when you're doing ray tracing type stuff that you need to know everything. But there are tricks to get around that where you don't use ray tracing, like I mentioned before.
Can you say, give me a crude rendering, and maybe 5 minutes later you're looking at it and you say, that looks good, now continue from here, and show it to me again in another 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And once you see that, you say, still looking good, let's go to completion, and spend the extra half hour.
Let's see.
You're asking whether the approximate renderings are intermediate steps on the way to
Yeah, it seems to me like that's probably not there now, where you're asking the rendering program to pause at the user specified time and sort of say you can make a go no go decision at any point. It would have to be added. I don't believe that's in there now. It doesn't sound hard, but you know.
I mean, algorithmically, is there any problem with that?
No. Unless you mean
Well-
something else. If you
well-
mean, does it show you a rough draft and increasingly get more complex, like some of these transmission schemes have?
Imagine that you're
Good
looking
answer.
at a CT reconstruction where you've only done one out of every 16 pixels, you know, and then you do the second out of every 16 and so on.
It would not, our renderer, as it's currently implemented, would not work that way. Doesn't mean you couldn't write a renderer that honors the RenderMan spec.
Yeah,
It didn't work
I don't
that
mean
way.
really the implementation, but the algorithm.
I don't think there's anything about the algorithm that would keep you.
Sorry?
I don't think there's anything about the algorithm that would keep you from doing that. I'd have to be serious on
Well,
it.
the quickest thing is wireframe, right?
Yes.
And does the wireframe is converting to the wireframe output part of converting to the more complex? Is I think what he's asking.
In going
So-
to the finished product, does it actually continue from one step to another?
Yeah,
Or
do
is it a
you-
separate?
It doesn't work
I
that
think
way.
he
You
already,
essentially
I think
have
he already said
you have
that
to
was
call your
the
shot
case.
in the first place and start from 0 to get there.
That's the way we have it implemented right now. Yeah. I mean, the whole idea is this thing is going to be so fast that you push the button, you get the picture.
Oh yeah, right.
I don't think it's that far away.
No,
I mean, you should look at the last 10 years and see what's happened during the last 10 years. It's going to change so fast that it's going to blow our minds, I think. Even though we know what the MIPS curve looks like, we just don't believe it. It's really going to happen. But I believe it. As soon as 1,000 MIPS hits, we're just so at a different place we can't even think about it yet. It's only a few years away, 1,000 MIPS. That's why I think we're putting this thing in place and trying to get people used to what it means to have, you know, the infrastructure in place. And the speed's going to take care of itself. I'm really not worried about that. The memory size and the speed are just going to, they're givens. They're just, I mean, I almost fell off my chair when I read the new IBM announcement the other day. 6,000 series, 27 MIPS, and 7 megaflops. Boom. Same price as, you know, something else. Cheaper than the PC I have on my desk, I think. And I just said, gee, I just moved up the MIPS curve, and I didn't expect it. I just thought that would happen next year. We just moved up right in front of my eyes. It's going to happen so fast. And I'm just not worried about the speed. That's going to take care of itself. Price is right now. That's the important thing. You can do it now.
Well, look at the make.
One of my best friends wrote one of the best paint programs there is, I understand. Paint Deluxe Paint or Paint Deluxe.
Yes.
Dan Silva is the guy who used to work with me at Lucasfilm. He wrote that, and I tracked. That's why I know about the Amiga, but we're not on it yet.
I was wondering when RenderMan is built into every PC, will it be on the CPU board or will it be on the video card?
It would. I would see it as. I think it will be part of the operating system. That's what I think.
Because also, wouldn't a processor to do rendering be sort of better optimized than a general? Wouldn't it be more parallel and?
Not clear. I mean, at some point you start paying a price for all these extra little speed ups, and our whole idea is not to have people pay that price. You just ride the MIPS curve right up, because it's now reasonable to do that.
Because
it wasn't 2 years ago. It wasn't reasonable.
My impression is that that's where PostScript is going, toward being on more optimized.
Yeah, I guess we think about display PostScript. Yeah, seems like a reasonable way to go. To me, I don't want to think about having people pay for another processor at this point.
Yeah.
Even though it's a good idea, I just don't think it's cheap enough yet to ask people to pay for it. So why don't people get used to making good pictures and learn what it means? Get the industry going so that people start building the modeling programs that we're dying from lack of. And by the time all that's out there, the horsepower is going to be there.
Yeah. Have you seen the video card Apple just announced a couple weeks ago that has a pretty hefty processor?
I haven't seen it, but I heard about it.
Yeah,
it's like their first time they had their own card.
The first thing I said when I saw it was like, well, when is it going to have RenderMan?
Yeah, I thought that was a significant event.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's sort of significant now, but I just wonder if, like, in the future, that will be taken for granted that, video cards have.
I think. We're going to get in trouble here, but I think these cards that have special processors built into them are the wrong idea. Because they are special purpose. They make vendors write device-dependent software, and there's no clear upward path. Where do they go next?
But as long as the operating system is doing all the negotiation of that.
It could be hidden. If it's hidden well, it's conceivable. I haven't seen it. So far, I've seen things like the 32010 devices, which I think is what the tag is about. That's a special purpose chip, if you write code for that, then you're stuck with that, and I don't know what the upward path is. And the code that runs on that won't run on my general purpose processor. So I think that's a mistake. If you have another processor over here that just speeds up the same piece of code you got running on your general purpose processor, then I can sort of see it. But nobody's told me how that special graphics processor, what the upward path is. I know what the upward path on a general purpose processor is. And I've been there. See, we have the Pixar image computer is the world's fanciest graphics board. It's a $30,000 graphics board, is the way to think about it. It's got 192 megabytes on the boards. And in order to get the imaging to go incredibly fast, you've got to write to our processors. But gee, if I want to change the processors underneath, I've got to rewrite the whole world because everything is written for those processors.
But wouldn't you
I don't want to do that again. For people that want that really incredible supercomputing, super image computing, it's a good solution, but it's not the general solution.
Is the architecture of your system different from a general purpose computer, or is it?
The Pixar image computer? Oh yeah, it's a parallel machine, it's a SIMD machine, and it goes like stink on pixels.
I mean, wouldn't you ideally though want one of those on a card in your PC to?
No, I'm just saying, not if it's got a special processor in it. I've lost the faith. I don't think that's the direction to go, because I now believe we're going up that MIPS curve so fast that just a general processor, or maybe 2 general purpose processor boards if you want more speed.
Maybe what we need is a parallel operating system to like negotiate that problem.
I think that's one of the things that has to happen.
Interesting. Wow.
So
That's
you're
great
not
stuff.
sure-
Well, I'm just also really wondering when the next feature film is coming out.
Oh, I should have mentioned something. We didn't get an Academy Award this year, but we stepped indirectly for The Abyss, the water tentacle, and The Abyss was made with RenderMan.
Wow.
That's a good example. That look and everything. You couldn't even imagine doing that effect without computers. They wouldn't have even thought of doing it without computer graphics. And they modeled it using Alias, I think, an Alias system, but they rendered it using RenderMan. So it's a good example.
I mean, like the next knick-knack or
Our next, we're doing commercials now. So I'm not going to promise that we have another piece that's just done for the heck of it, like those pieces all were. We've got some commercials out. Well, the only one I can tell you about so far is that these guys are real touchy. They're the most secretive of all companies, production companies are. And the only one that I can tell you about is Lifesavers holes. They're going to sell the holes in the Lifesavers.
Yeah.
So we've done a commercial for Lifesavers holes, and it's being test marketed in Ohio or someplace like that right now. Assuming that it passes the market test, then you'll see it.
I'm going to do something with all those holes.
Yeah, it's a little cylinder, the same size and shape as a.
Realized they could sell donut holes.
And the holes fit in this kind of like Pez. You pop this thing on. All our animators had them around eating them while they were.
Are you going to replace claymation?
No. I mean,
that's got to be one of the most tedious tasks.
Well, all animation is tedious. I think it's even computer-assisted animation is tedious. It's tedious business. But it's a different medium, so I mean, it's got its own look. If I'd want to look like claymation, that's really the only way to do it. I mean, I guess I could simulate it with a computer, but why? Use the clay. It's probably easier, actually. Beautiful stuff, actually. I love that claymation.
Are there abilities in RenderMan to do the tweens, as they're called?
No, RenderMan. Again, RenderMan is just the renderer. It takes tweening, automatic in-betweening is what you mean, is the part of the modeling process.
Okay.
It's creating the model through time, if you will. It's creating a model for each frame is another way to think about it. That's modeling. RenderMan takes those models, however you got them, and turns them into pixels.
Right. And there's no tweening for pixels, right?
No tweening. That's pixels are, this. I think of rendering as this thing you do to. It's like you do it to a piece of paper, and it's a one-way thing. You just write on that piece of paper, and you're done. So all the computation has to happen somewhere else.
I'm wondering if you render a lumpy surface onto a smooth model. Do you change the XYZ coordinates, or do you just fake? You do. Okay.
It's called displacement maps. There are bump maps that fake the bumps by changing the light direction. Then we have displacement maps, which actually change the XYZ. But it does it in a different place. You don't actually model the geometry yourself, which is too tedious. You just do it with this table.
You modify
really
the
good
model.
trick.
You modify
Yeah, you modify the model, but you do it during the rendering step.
Okay.
RenderMan's got such a different way of looking at things. It's not traditional at all. It parcels up the problem in quite a different way, and that's how we got it all to work, was just to move things downstream that weren't normally downstream.
Is there a noticeable difference between the way you did the bumps and versus this changing the XY stuff?
Yeah, at the
I mean-
silhouettes, it's real obvious.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, for the
well, the
final
silhouettes are a
product-
giveaway. I mean, the first thing I do when I
Yeah.
see a bumpy thing, I look at the silhouettes, and if it's a smooth curve, I go, they're faking it.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean,
in the final
you probably didn't notice in,
yeah. No, I couldn't tell. I
in
was
Genesis
wondering.
demo, the cratered,
Yeah.
moon was just bump mapped, so it had
Huh.
absolutely spherical cross section. I don't think most people notice that. I mean, circumference, but.
I like that effect very much from the Star Trek movie. The only thing that I thought was a fault of that effect, although it was almost undistinguishable as a computer effect, was that the viewer actually goes through the model. There's a part with a high point.
Yeah, you know about that? There's a place where we, that's fractals. We use fractals. Fractals is a way of generating models, okay, real fast. Put in a few points, and a fractal program will turn it into 1 billion points. But it's a modeling program. It's not a rendering program, okay. So, and there's randomness in it. So we use fractal. That was the first time fractals got used in a serious way in making pictures. And so we built the mounts, but we only knew randomly where they were. And when we actually created that one frame there, we'd blown it. We flew through a mountain, so we stopped. We went back. We cut a notch in the model just for that one frame, and re-rendered that one frame. So as you fly up to it, all of a sudden this notch appears. You fly through. You cheat a lot in the movies.
You responded positively to a lot of questions about how this could be divvied up and parallelized, and doesn't that resonate strongly with the growth of the transputer board market?
I had the same question.
We have a transputer board accelerator, but we decided not to market it because we thought it was off the curve.
Off the curve.
You're talking about a hardware design.
Yeah.
Not sure what you meant.
Well, I'm talking about the performance curve, just the MIPS curve. If you plan to hit there and actually you should be here in order to compete, then you're off the curve, or you missed.
Okay.
It's a bad idea. So we decided that was a mistake. But Levco has a transputer board that runs RenderMan for the Mac, so that's an existence proof. We're not doing that, but Levco has that. That's what they sell. That's fine. I hope these companies with transputers ride the curve, because either transputers got to come out with a faster machine, or you got to plug in a different kind of processor, because or more transputers. But then you're paying a lot of money. I think the right answer is to get faster transputers, or some kind of all the above. Somehow they got to stay on the curve, and it's a tricky business. The i860 is a real nice looking chip, for example, right now. And one of the chips that helped blow my mind this year that PCs are now so wait a minute, those kind of chips lying around.
So the raw processor speed for the transputer modules is not keeping up with the general purpose.
Well, I don't want to misspeak here, because I don't know what NMOS has up their sleeve.
Yeah.
But if you buy into what they currently have, the
800.
800.
4T800s don't beat an I.
How many?
Say 4.
Well, price-wise, do they?
No.
So that's where it falls. That's
Yeah.
what I mean. It's got the price, the speed, and
Yeah.
the growth path. All got to make sense. And if you fall off that, then you're in trouble.
Okay.
And we decided if we committed, we'd fall off the curve. So we decommitted ourselves. Besides, we didn't want to compete with our own, Levco and companies like that.
So how do you interface with Levco? Do they start with the
They bundle RenderMan,
spec, or do they?
No, they bought a license for renderer from us, and they bundled our product into their line.
So that you would make available C code source to them?
No.
No.
Binaries.
I'm sorry.
No.
Executable.
Yeah. Well, we have to work with people with special processors, of course, to get the code running.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all by special arrangement.
Right.
The RenderMan spec you described, does that include a driver spec, general driver interface for an arbitrary, to front an arbitrary display?
you're talking about the display process. What we supply, I think, are a set of drivers for common displays. On a PC, we handle several, the Targas, the Vista, VGA.
Let's say you have a custom display.
Custom, then there would have to be a driver written for it.
I know. Is the
code available for doing that?
No, no,
I think so. I think we make
is
that
the
available.
interface to the driver what the driver should look like? Is that available? What services it should provide so that you could then?
No, we don't have anything to say about that. We just say, here's the set of pixels. You've told it up front what the resolution is going to
I
be.
see.
Here's the stream of pixels that fits that resolution. It's up to you, your driver, to deal with it.
Basically, your output then is a two-dimensional array of pixels.
Absolutely.
With
That's it.
three.
It's actually a one-dimensional array of pixels that happens to be
with 3 color values per pixel.
4, RGB and alpha.
It's very common. What is it? I've heard about that a lot.
Alpha is something we invented at New York Tech about 10 years ago. Yeah,
I heard
we invented that
it's gonna
concept.
be on the next. In
It's,
fact,
it's on the Apple. It's a real simple concept we came up with a bunch of years ago. We finally realized that you map things together so often that a fundamental part of these pixels should be the matting value, the transparency of the pixel, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So we called it alpha because from lerping, linear interpolation. We call it lerping. Linear interpolation, alpha A plus 1 minus alpha B, that famous formula. That's where the alpha came from. That's the alpha in lerp. And since lerping is such a fundamental operation to pixel packing, we just made it part of the pixel. And folks have now picked up on it. But yeah, we invented it. Alpha channel's our name. I mean, the whole thing. It's another gift to the industry. A lot of gifts to the industry here.
So that's how you can make glass teapots and stuff like that.
Yes. I mean, what you do with the glass teapot, you send out the RGB of the teapot, and the alpha would be a certain almost transparency. So then you could mat that element, teapot element, over any kind of background and have it show through. Exactly how it works.
Where they're really bright reflections, you don't have a lot of transparency.
Right.
The reflection itself is overpowered.
Exactly. Then you have a high alpha there.
With that in mind, then, does the computer model actually simulate parts of the picture that you don't see, assuming that what you put in front of it may or may not be transparent?
Sure, that is a model. A model is a three-dimensional thing that has no notion of where the camera is, and, well, I gotta say this carefully. It is a three-dimensional thing. It says this box is on that table there, and it's this long, it occupies that much space. The rendering program figures out what's in front of what, what's transparent, and what shows through, and all that hard stuff from a given camera.
Is that really necessary for a two-dimensional image, though?
Well, I think so. If I change the camera position...
I understand how that would be important for the model, but for the actual rendering...
Is your direction that RenderMan might support
that's
composite vector and raster representation?
I think it's safe to say something like PostScript and RenderMan will talk to each other. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to do. Like, I don't want to... Why should somebody have to model a typeface? You get it out of your PostScript. PostScript lets you do that with wonderful tools. Use it. I mean, and it's already in geometric form. Have that drive RenderMan somehow or another.
Be a postman. Are you at all worried though about like Apple and Microsoft pulling a TrueType on you? Or?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to make this. That we're hoping we don't offend, like apparently Adobe offended, that we play with all the big guys so that they encourage us and make the price right too. It's real important. We intend to make this just as affordable as if it's widespread, then it's going to be real cheap. And I mean, what are we comparing against? Well, a few years ago, to get that kind of quality rendering, you'd have to buy at least a $25,000 program, and about that expensive a machine at least to run it on. We're talking in hundreds of dollars here, and that's one-off to the end user. Imagine what the price might be to the guys that sell millions of these things bundled. The idea is to make it part of the infrastructure. It's like operating system prices.
Tonight cleared up the misconception that RenderMan was very expensive, and
Absolutely not. And I hope another misconception I cleared up is it's not just for pretty pictures. It's for the knob. It does it all. I mean, it's supposed to be a real fundamental piece.
I might have missed if someone's asked a question earlier, but what about the input to RenderMan from the modeling?
Usually rib files is the way people are choosing to go. We made it, I didn't say, but there was another thing out there called the Developers Render Man, another one of the handouts.
Mhm.
Developers Render Man is a package just for developers who are tending to bundle it into their product. And so in that package you get all the stuff you need for generating rib files, source code even to bundle into your product to generate rib files. And you can either send, just pipe the rib files over to a self-standing rendering process, RenderMan process, or you can bundle the renderer, a binary, right into your application itself. We thought the bundling would be the ones that vendors would choose, but they seem to be going toward rib files more. Mac for sure. PC world, things are so different. There's not that much uniformity out there, so they tend to do the bundling.
Thank you. You mentioned the price on Mac, but I didn't hear you say sort of what the net price would be on a PC.
Well, because that's not what we're selling. Is you need to go ask the vendors. I don't know what an Autodesk product costs. $2,000-3,000 bucks, something like that. I don't know. I don't know what CAD key costs.
Can you get RenderMan by itself?
You can. I mean, that's what the developers RenderMan is. That's $2,500. But the idea is it's not to be an end user product to go down to the store and buy. This is for sophisticated users, developers namely, and it's priced so it doesn't compete with our own. Okay, we don't want to compete with those guys, so the price is intended to make logical sense in the market. It's also got a lot of stuff in there you wouldn't ordinarily need, like this source code for bundling into your product to generate rib files and documentation, a bunch of stuff like that you wouldn't ordinarily need.
Does that give the developer all that he needs to market a product? Does he owe you royalties on the product that interfaces? No?
Oh, if it's got the RenderMan, if he bundles RenderMan into it, the render, then yes, he's got to talk to us.
Okay, the renderer.
If he generates rib files, he can do that.
The renderer has to run on whatever platform you choose to implement it on.
Well, the vendor will, if it's sufficiently good business, we'll put it on anybody's platform.
I see.
We're not married to anybody's platform. We played that game before.
Okay. An implementation of RenderMan though is environment dependent. It depends on the operating system that's running under and all.
Well, it not so dependent on that as it needs a C compiler.
Well, it's ubiquitous these days.
That's what I think. Right. Yeah, that's why we chose it. Well, that's not the only reason. We're in love with C. We've been using it for 10 years. So.
Sure.
We've hoped we've written it so it's very easy to port. Usually just a recompile.
Yeah.
But if you dramatically change systems like PC compatibles to Amigos, it's a fairly dramatic change, and there might be some other glue and stuff that has to be done. But we'd like to talk about that. You tell my ignorance as Amiga is showing here. I don't know enough to answer you intelligently, but
I'm personally not involved in that sort of graphics, but there are a number of companies doing a lot of sophisticated graphic products with Amiga, and I'm surprised some of them aren't knocking on your door already.
Well, I think they are. I hope more of them do.
Yeah. There's a Willow board supposedly that generates composite RGB signals on a VGA monitor. Especially a multi-sync VGA monitor that goes from 15.
That's what I was saying. There are some people out there that have some pretty clever ideas about driving the price of RGB down. I'm just sitting there, guys, you got to do it. I mean, the PC world is on the wrong track.
Nationally, the Willow board.
Oh, I'd say video at least. Although I don't have any problem with VGA resolution, 320 by 200, whatever it is. I don't have any problem with that.
This concludes this presentation in the Power Sharing series. If you wish to learn about other programs in the series, please write to Power Sharing, Riverside, Connecticut 06878. This is Charles Mann, thanking you for joining us in the Power Sharing series. Programs bringing together people, computers, and you.